Hogarth. That's an embarrassing name. Might as well call him Zeppo or something. The Iron Giant. The Iron Giant is a 1999 film directed by Brad Bird and stars a really awesome cast. And this is one of the things I didn't really realize as a kid. You've got Christopher McDonald, you've got Vin Diesel, you've got Jennifer Aniston, Harry Connick Jr. I mean, there's so many people in this film that, as a kid, this came out in 99. I was 6 years old. 6 years old, you don't realize, you don't really connect who the voices are. I remember watching this a few years later when I was a little bit older and recognizing Christopher McDonald's voice as Shooter McGavin from Happy Gilmore and being like, hey, that sounds like Shooter McGavin, and then looking it up. And I remember at the time realizing that Vin Diesel was the voice of the Giant too. So those were a couple of names that I recognized and then didn't notice at the time, or maybe I didn't see at the time, that Jennifer Aniston played the mother. And so really just a star-studded cast in this lesser-known cartoon film. So before I get into the review, let me explain why I'm doing The Iron Giant now. I just came off of my Halloween run. We just got out of October. And so even though there are more scary movies that I really want to dive into, quite a few actually that I still want to do, I needed a break from horror movies. So I wanted to go kind of in the opposite direction. At first I thought I would do a comedy, but I don't know. I just, I couldn't find a comedy that wasn't just a classic. And that was something else that I didn't really want to do. I didn't really want to do another classic movie because I don't want you to know before I ever get started that I'm about to slap another, 95 or something really good on another movie review. I wanted to do something a little different, maybe something that many people hadn't heard of, maybe something that people weren't quite as aware of. Maybe this movie is a lot more popular than I think it is, but I've never heard it talked about much, which is a real shame because this is one of my favorite movies of all time. Since I was a little kid, I really enjoyed this movie. There is a lot to like about it, and I won't get too much into that right now. But let me just say that after I went through several movies, I broke it down to several. I didn't want to get back into Netflix again because I've done a lot of Netflix original movies and Netflix series and things like that. So I wanted to get away from Netflix a little bit with this too. Eventually, I narrowed it down to a few comedy movies. I narrowed it down to a few other movies, some movies from my childhood that I really enjoyed. And I just kept coming back to The Iron Giant because it's been one of my favorite movies of all time. It's something I've always wanted to talk about. It's something I feel like more people should know about this movie. It's so good. So we landed on The Iron Giant, and now we're going to talk about it. Just so you know, in case you're not aware, The Iron Giant takes place in 1957 in Rockridge, Maine? I think the town is Rockridge, and I believe it's in Maine. Anyway, it's at the height of the Cold War, which is very important for the story. It's very important for the story to understand what's going on, to understand culture at the time, to understand concerns of the United States nation and why they might react the way they did. Also, this movie heavily pulls from Superman's story. It really pays homage in a lot of different ways to Superman. If you haven't seen this movie, you should watch it. And if you watch this movie as a kid, you need to go back and watch it again. I promise. If you're thinking in your head, I don't remember that movie being very good, watch it again. You're crazy if you don't think this is a really good movie. I don't know how anybody, man, woman, child, no matter what you are, there's something here for everybody. But before I get too carried away, let's talk about the negatives. Not many negatives I can really come up with. I guess you could say, if you're a grown-up, that sometimes you look at cartoons and think, well, this is a cartoon, it's for kids. It probably doesn't deal with adult themes very much. It probably has very childish humor. It probably doesn't have much in it for me as an adult. And most of the time with cartoon-based movies, you would be correct, but not with this one. And I understand, look, cartoons are typically for kids, but this movie has so many great themes, so many great moments. This movie makes me laugh every time I watch it. Not just like a chuckle or like a smirk. It makes me laugh out loud. I can think off the top of my head at least 3 or 4 scenes that get me every time I watch it. It's a tearjerker. By the end of it, you're invested. You're invested in the well-being of Hogarth, of Hogarth's mother, of Dean, of the Giant. They do such a good job getting you invested in these characters. You don't have to have live action for the acting to be good. The animation is really good. That would be another potential negative that I could see. There are a few moments where like the animation isn't perfectly crisp, but when it matters, when the action hits, it actually looks really, really good. Now, I would say in some of the more minor moments, you might see one or two things where like a facial expression or something funny might happen with like a lip. But unless you're just looking for those things, you're not going to notice them. It's very negligible. The animation is really good. The story is really good. It's a great one for all ages. If you don't believe me, just give this one a shot. I guarantee you won't be disappointed. And that's kind of it for the negatives. It's hard to pick apart too much with an animated film if the animation is good and the voice acting is good. And both of those things are true. As far as the story goes, the story is really well put together. Now, you could give it negatives because it rips off a little bit from Superman and the story there, but it does at least go as far to acknowledge within the movie that Superman is a huge inspiration for this film. So there's a point where Hogarth has the giant hiding out in his barn, and he takes him some comic books so that he won't be bored. And among those comic books is Superman. And he tells him that Superman is a lot like you. He crash landed on Earth, didn't know what he was doing, but he ends up being a good guy and a savior and a hero. And that's what Hogarth is trying to teach this giant, is that he can be that hero. He doesn't have to be a metal monster. So let's talk about the positives, and I've tried to stay away from them. I know I've already touched on several of them already. First of all, let me say this out the gate. I know I've already kind of said it, but the voice acting in this movie is so good. Christopher McDonald, untouchable. Untouchable in this movie as Kent Mansley. Kent Mansley is so funny in this movie. He's the bad guy, and yeah, you do hate him. Yeah, he's on your nerves. He is a douchebag. He presents himself. He's so self-important. He's one of the most self-important characters in any movie. He's just you can't stand him, but he's so funny. He's constantly getting in his own way. There's one scene where like he gets a chewing from his commanding officer over the phone, and then like he tries to hang up the phone. This was back in 1957 when phones were attached to a, I don't even know how to say it. I don't even know how to explain it to you. If you've never seen it wasn't like a rotary. Maybe it was a rotary. I can't remember. I'm cutting the bit about the phone. But anyway, after he takes the chewing, he tries to hang up the phone and it keeps falling off the receiver. And it's such a real life thing. He's just taking a chewing. He's frustrated and angry. And now this phone is such a small thing. This phone just won't lay on the receiver, and he just picks it up and starts banging the phone onto the receiver and yelling at the phone. It's hilarious. It gets me every time. I'm grinning like an idiot just thinking about it. What are you doing? What do you think you're doing? Yelling at the phone. It kills me every time. And there's so many more moments I don't want to ruin for you in case you do watch this movie. Christopher McDonald does a great job. Jennifer Aniston does a good job as the mother. I think her name's Annie. You don't, the story's not really about her, so she's only in it so much, but she does have, I'm not saying that she's not in it much, because she is. She's got several lines in the film. As far as most important characters go, she's not super high on the list. She is an important character for the story, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that you don't get the most emotional range from her. So there's not just a whole lot to pick apart with Jennifer Aniston's performance, but she does a really good job, I thought. All the voice acting in this movie is really good. And Christopher McDonald isn't the only funny character. Hogarth has funny lines. Dean has one moment in particular that's very funny, and a couple of others that are pretty funny. There are a lot of laughs in this movie. It's super funny, but there's also a lot of emotional depth. There are moments, again, not to give anything away, but there are moments where it affects me every time I watch it. You want to cry. You want to just kind of tear up and just be like, golly, that hits me. That hits me right here every time. And it does. It does me. And, watch it for yourself. Maybe I just have a nostalgic feel for it because I love this movie growing up. Memorable lines. There are so many memorable quotes. There's one quote in particular, and I'm not making this up. This is absolutely true, that has stuck with me my entire life. There's one point where Hogarth is complaining to Dean in the junkyard, and Dean says, look, you are who you choose to be. And that line is repeated later in the film. Hogarth says that to the giant. And man, that's such a powerful line. If you apply that to your life, such a simple thought, you are who you choose to be. That's so true. So often, I'm going to start preaching if I'm not careful, but just so often in our lives, we complain and complain and complain about things that are going on and what we're doing and where we're at. And at the end of the day, you are exactly who you choose to be. You make the choices. Now, other things influence us. Sure, hard times come and go, but so do good times. And you decide how those things affect you. You decide who you are in life. And man, it's a powerful statement. It's so simple, and it is literally stuck with me my entire life. Listen, this movie, it literally has it all, and maybe it turns you away because it's a cartoon. I'm not watching that. That's for kids. Whatever it is, I understand it's for kids. Fine. If that's the way you want to look at it, you're missing out. Because when I say The Iron Giant is one of my favorite movies of all time, it really is. Now, I don't know if you put my back against the wall if it would make the top 10. I don't know if it would even make the top 20. But it is a movie that has certainly affected my life. It has certainly stuck with me. And it's one that I don't think very many people have seen. I don't think very many people have given this movie a chance. And it really deserves one. The Iron Giant, all things considered, I'm giving The Iron Giant a 99 out of 100. All right, listen, if you've seen The Iron Giant, I would love to hear your comments below. I want to hear if I'm the only one who holds this movie in such high esteem. I could not give this movie enough praise if I spent a half hour talking about it. There's so much that I left out, so much more that I could have said about this movie. But if you have seen it, I would love to hear more comments down in the comments section. I would also love to hear if you disagreed, if you've seen The Iron Giant and you weren't impressed, or you thought it was just a cute kids movie. Maybe it's just nostalgia for me. Maybe I'm just nostalgic for it. You tell me down in the comments. Let me know what you thought. As always, if you disagreed, please don't get mad. And remember, it's just one man's opinion. Thanks.